Sam Spencer didn't believe in signs. At least, that's what he always told himself. The man who could never figure out how to get his grocery list right, let alone follow any kind of greater purpose, wasn't about to start ascribing meaning to a meteor shower. It was just another Tuesday. He'd been trudging home from his boring office job, a place he worked because it had a steady paycheck and a coffee machine he knew how to operate, when the first bright streak of light tore across the sky. At first, he thought it was just a car headlight, one of those trick of the eye kind of things that only happened when you were half asleep behind the wheel of your Hyundai. But no, this one was big. Really big. A meteor, he thought. Nothing more. Sam wasn't the type to stop and gawk at falling space debris. In fact, he was the kind of guy who'd rather keep his head down, get home, eat a frozen pizza, and go to bed. But today, as the sky crackled with an unnatural, pulsating glow, he felt an almost magnetic pull in his chest. It wasn't fear. It was curiosity. A strange, almost primitive sensation that whispered, "Look at this. It's important." So he did. He stared up at the darkening sky as the meteor shower unfolded, glowing like fireworks on the horizon. His mouth went dry. No one else was around. The street was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of a faraway truck. Sam shook his head, muttering under his breath. Crazy, he thought. It's just a meteor shower. You've been watching too many sci-fi movies. But then it happened. The air around him seemed to distort. The ground shook just slightly beneath his feet. He felt something. A sharp, sudden jolt like a lightning bolt crashing straight through his body. He stumbled backward, eyes wide, as an intense burst of energy shot through his chest. Sam froze. He couldn't move. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and the world tilted, just for a moment, then, nothing. No impact. No explosions. No earth-shattering event, just a strange, lingering sense that something had fundamentally shifted. The universe had nudged him. Or maybe shoved him. Hard. Sam blinked a few times, then glanced around, expecting someone to be standing there, staring at him. But there was no one. He sighed, rubbed his temples, and muttered under his breath, "Great, now I'm talking to myself. Maybe I should lay off the frozen pizza and start eating real food again. Maybe I'll even see a doctor. Or a priest. Or someone who's good with whatever this is." He made his way home, albeit with a lingering sense of unease that couldn't be shaken. The next morning, Sam woke up with a headache that felt like someone had tried to drill into his skull while he slept. When he dragged himself to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face, he noticed something odd. The reflection in the mirror looked different. He wasn't sure how to explain it. His face was still the same, his hair a bit messier than usual, but his eyes looked almost brighter. He squinted. Maybe it was just the headache messing with him. He had a reputation for being a little slow to wake up, but that wasn't the strangest part. No, that came when Sam accidentally knocked his toothbrush off the counter. As it fell, he instinctively reached out for it, not thinking. A wave of force shot out from his hand, and the toothbrush froze mid-air, hovering in place, as if the laws of physics had just been completely forgotten. He stared at it, heart pounding in his chest. His breath came out in short, jagged bursts. He reached out slowly, the toothbrush still suspended like some bizarre magic trick. His fingers brushed against it, and it dropped gently back onto the counter, as though nothing had happened. But Sam's pulse was racing. What the hell was that? For the next few hours, Sam tried to ignore it. He told himself it was just some weird side effect of the meteor shower, maybe radiation, or space junk affecting his brain. But when his cat, Mr. Whiskers, jumped up onto the windowsill and knocked over a cup, Sam instinctively reached out to catch it. The cup, too, paused in midair as soon as his hand was near it, defying all logic. Sam gulped. Was he actually controlling gravity? He tried to put it out of his mind. He spent the day at work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to those strange moments. Maybe he was dreaming. Maybe he had finally cracked under the weight of his boring, monotonous life, but as the evening rolled in, he found himself standing in front of his apartment door, holding the handle, and then, with a glance, the handle itself began to bend. Not break, but warp. Like it was made of taffy. No way, Sam muttered. This can't be real. But it was, and that night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the universe spoke to him in a way that no ordinary person could understand. In his dreams, the stars stretched and pulsed, twisting in intricate patterns that Sam couldn't begin to comprehend. The blackness of space surrounded him, endless and vast. Yet in the midst of it all, there was a presence. It wasn't an entity, but something far more ancient. Sam could feel it, a force pulling him closer. A voice, deep and cosmic, whispered in the dark recesses of his mind. The gravity of your actions will reshape everything. The trap is set. The black hole approaches. You are its agent. The world is bound to you now. Sam bolted upright, gasping for air. He glanced around, unsure if he was awake or still caught in some kind of cosmic dream. It was the black hole. The days that followed were a blur. Sam's powers grew more pronounced, more uncontrollable. Objects didn't just float anymore. They warped. The world bent under his will, his fingertips barely grazing a surface before it twisted in strange, unexplainable ways. The local news was soon flooded with strange reports of unnatural phenomena, cars floating in mid-air, entire buildings shaking as if caught in a violent storm. And Sam? Well, he became something of a local hero. People called him the Gravity Man. He levitated groceries, turned water bottles into fountains of swirling, spinning liquid, and used his powers to impress his friends with ridiculous feats of strength. But then, one day, things took a darker turn. Sam was fiddling with an old radio at home when it happened. He'd been experimenting, of course, flicking the dial as he concentrated on the power surging through his body. A stray wave of force hit the radio, and the ground beneath him rumbled. That was when the first crack appeared in the sky. It wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't a storm. It was a distortion, like the fabric of reality itself was beginning to warp. Sam's heart skipped a beat. The black hole wasn't just a dream. It was coming for him and for Earth. Sam sat in the silence that followed, his mind racing. The rumbling sensation underfoot had stopped, but the air around him seemed to hum with an unfamiliar energy. He looked out the window, his eyes squinting as he scanned the sky. The crack, a thin, shimmering fissure that had split the clouds, remained. It was small, almost unnoticeable, yet Sam couldn't shake the sense that it was not just a weather anomaly. He could feel it now, deep in his bones, like gravity itself had started to warp around him, as if the very laws of the universe were slowly unraveling. He stood up and walked toward the window, his movements stiff. The glowing crack in the sky pulsed, faint at first, like a heartbeat, and it sent a cold shiver down his spine. Sam could feel it. The black hole. The voice he'd heard in his dreams echoed in his mind. The black hole approaches. The trap. The trap was real. He stumbled away from the window, suddenly dizzy, his head swimming with thoughts he couldn't fully grasp. His powers were tied to this force, this cosmic anomaly, but what did it want? What had it done to him? He placed his hands on his desk, steadying himself. Everything around him felt too light, like he wasn't fully connected to the earth beneath him. He tried to steady his breathing, but each breath seemed to make him float a little higher off the ground. It wasn't just his mind playing tricks. The gravitational field in his apartment was shifting. He was floating a few inches at first, and then a foot. His feet left the floor, and his body followed, as if drawn upward by invisible strings. He caught himself before he could hit the ceiling, clenching his fists, forcing his body to come back down. This wasn't just gravity warping. This was something else entirely. He shook his head, trying to clear the confusion. Sam had to get a grip. He was a normal guy. Just a regular office worker with no business having anything to do with black holes. He needed to get it together, take control. He could feel his muscles tightening with the effort of focusing on something as simple as gravity. A normal guy couldn't manipulate the pull of the universe like it was a child's toy, but he wasn't normal anymore, was he? The buzzing in his mind intensified, louder now, a constant reminder that the black hole's energy was close. He had to understand it, or it would destroy him, and probably everything else. Sam tried again, focusing this time on the weight of his feet. Slowly, carefully, he allowed himself to sink back down toward the floor, like a leaf falling back to the earth. Gravity returned to normal. For a moment, it felt as though nothing had changed, but Sam knew better. He wasn't just controlling the gravity in his room, his powers were stretching, reaching farther, becoming something that didn't just affect his small corner of the world. He grabbed his coat and slammed the door behind him, his heart pounding as he rushed out into the street. He needed to find answers. The sky above him had changed in the few minutes he'd been inside. The crack in the clouds had widened, and more streaks of light pulsed across the heavens, like veins of light carved into the very fabric of space. People on the street stopped, staring up, confused and frightened. A young woman on her phone started screaming. The world had noticed. Sam could feel the weight of it now, a heavy pressure in the air, as if everything was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He turned toward the convenience store on the corner, where his best friend Kevin worked. Kevin, an unassuming guy with a quick wit and a sharp sense of humor, had been the one person Sam had confided in about his strange powers. Kevin was also the kind of person who would have a logical explanation for this, no matter how crazy it seemed. Sam burst through the door, panting. Kevin, who had been stocking chips on the shelf, looked up in surprise. Sam? Kevin raised an eyebrow. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. It's worse, Sam muttered, trying to catch his breath. It's the black hole. It's here. Or at least it's coming. It's messing with everything. The skies cracked open. Kevin. You've got to be kidding me, Kevin said, but the nervousness in his voice betrayed his sarcasm. That's insane. What, like, a black hole is just gonna pop out of the sky and suck us all in? I don't know, Sam said, but I feel it. I can't control it. It's like gravity's messed up. I mean, just look at the sky. Kevin turned toward the door and squinted out into the street. His expression shifted from skepticism to confusion, then to alarm. Okay, that's definitely not normal. I told you, Sam said. I'm not crazy. I've been trying to figure out what happened to me after the meteor shower. I thought it was radiation or something, but now it's worse. I can feel it, whatever this thing is, it's connected to me. It's pulling me in. And I think it's pulling everything else in too. Kevin swallowed hard, clearly trying to keep his cool. So what do we do? How do we fix this? I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out too, Sam said, running his fingers through his hair. I think we need to figure out where it's coming from. Find out what it wants. The lights in the store flickered, and the ground beneath them rumbled again, this time more intensely than before. Kevin gasped, stumbling backward, and Sam grabbed his arm to steady him. This is bad, Sam. This is really bad. I know, Sam said, his voice tight with urgency. We have to act fast. I can't keep it under control much longer. The two of them raced out into the street, and Sam immediately felt the pull of the gravitational anomaly. The air shimmered, and the ground seemed to buckle beneath them as if some invisible force was pressing down. Sam closed his eyes, focusing. He couldn't afford to lose control, not now. He reached out with his powers, gently adjusting the gravity around them to keep them grounded. The crack in the sky widened further, and the earth shook. People screamed as the streets began to collapse, the ground splitting open, causing buildings to sway and fall. The pull from the sky was intensifying, like a vacuum was sucking the life out of everything it touched. Sam could feel it now, deep inside. This was no accident. This was no freak event. It was a force beyond human comprehension. The black hole was here, Sam was the conduit. And the world was beginning to crumble under its weight. As they ran down the street, Sam focused all his energy on trying to stabilize the gravitational forces around him. But the more he tried, the worse it got. The air was thick with pressure, and the ground beneath his feet threatened to break apart. It was as if every step he took was dragging him closer to the black hole, and the harder he fought against it, the harder it pulled. "Sam, what do we do?" Kevin shouted, panic in his voice. "This is insane. How are we supposed to stop a black hole?" Sam didn't have an answer. He didn't even know how he was supposed to stop himself from being sucked in, let alone the entire planet. He looked up again at the ever-widening crack in the sky. The glowing streaks had turned into jagged lines, veins of pure cosmic energy, and there, at the center of it all, was the black hole. It was not just a force of nature anymore. It was alive, and it was coming for him. Sam could feel the pull intensifying. His body felt like it was being stretched, his very cells being tugged toward the source of the disturbance. He staggered, his legs buckling beneath him as gravity warped around him, pulling him off balance, and then, in a flash of realization, it hit him: the black hole wasn't just pulling him in. It was using him. He was its bridge and the world. It wasn't just a passive observer. The black hole was drawing Earth itself closer to the event horizon. Closer to being swallowed whole. Sam staggered back, trying to keep his footing. It was a race against time. He had to find a way to sever the connection before the pull became irreversible, but there was no easy way out. There was only one chance, and Sam had to take it. The pull of the black hole had grown unbearable. Sam could feel his insides vibrating, like his very atoms were being stretched, pulled toward some distant, terrible center. The earth beneath his feet no longer felt like solid ground, it felt like the surface of a ship about to sink beneath the waves. Kevin, eyes wide with fear, stumbled beside him. "Sam, what do we do now?" His voice was barely audible over the hum of the forces gathering in the air, but Sam could hear it clearly. The panic was setting in. Kevin, the guy who'd always been the first to joke about everything, was now frozen with terror. Sam couldn't blame him. There was no time for jokes now. Sam staggered forward, trying to ground himself in the chaos around him. The air was thick with pressure, an invisible force pressing down on him, trying to crush him into the earth. Buildings around them creaked and groaned, and the ground beneath their feet shook violently as fissures appeared in the pavement, cracks spidering outward like the fabric of reality itself was being torn apart. Sam closed his eyes for a moment, breathing heavily. He could feel the pull of the black hole intensifying, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. It was as if the black hole was aware of him now, responding to his presence. He could feel the force reaching into his body, making the very marrow of his bones shiver. He couldn't let it win. He had to fight back. Sam had no idea how to stop the black hole, no idea how to sever the connection that had tethered him to it, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't let it continue. Not only would it destroy him, it would destroy everything: Kevin, the city, the entire planet. The weight of that truth crashed down on him like a tidal wave, threatening to drown him. He had to take control. He focused, trying to center himself amidst the chaos. His body trembled with the effort, but he forced his mind to narrow, to shut out the fear and focus only on one thing: the pull. In that moment, everything else ceased to exist: the city, the ground beneath him, the world itself. It was just Sam and the black hole. He felt the darkness, its presence pressing against his mind. It was powerful, ancient, an unstoppable force that had consumed everything in its path. But Sam knew something that the black hole didn't: it had made one mistake. It had underestimated him. The energy surged within him, as if the very air around him was becoming a part of him. He could feel the weight of gravity tugging at his limbs, pulling him in every direction, and for the briefest of moments, he thought he might lose control. But then he focused harder, pushing back against the force, forcing the gravity to bend to his will. For the first time since the meteor shower, Sam felt a flicker of something beyond power, beyond fear. It was knowledge. It was the understanding that he wasn't just fighting against the black hole. He was fighting for the very laws of nature itself. He pushed out with his mind, stretching his will across the entire space around him, attempting to undo the damage the black hole had done. The air shifted, vibrating as though the atmosphere itself was about to tear open. The ground beneath them rumbled as though the planet itself was groaning under the pressure. For a brief moment, there was nothing, no sound, no movement. The world held its breath, and then, with a deafening crack, the gravitational forces collapsed, snapping back into place like a rubber band released. Sam gasped, feeling the sudden relief wash over him. His body fell back toward the ground, the crushing weight of the black hole's pull dissipating. The earth underfoot felt solid once again, but he staggered, his knees buckling beneath him. He barely managed to catch himself against a nearby lamppost. Kevin, his face ashen, grabbed him, holding him steady. Sam could feel the sweat pouring down his back, his chest heaving with exertion. He had done it. He'd managed to push the black hole's energy back, at least for now, but it was far from over. Sam could still feel the pull, a lingering pressure in the air, like a storm waiting to break. He turned to Kevin, his voice barely more than a whisper. "This isn't over. It's not gone. It's just waiting." Kevin nodded, swallowing hard. "Then what now?" Sam stood up straighter, blinking away the dizziness that clouded his vision. "I don't know. But we have to find out where it's coming from. I need to know more. It's not just me, it's something else, something much bigger than anything I can understand." They both turned toward the sky, where the crack in the heavens still pulsed with an eerie glow. The black hole was still there, still alive. Its energy lingered like a malignant presence, waiting, watching, but Sam had one advantage. He wasn't alone in this anymore. He had Kevin. And together, they would figure this out. They had no choice. They walked in silence for a few minutes, the sound of their footsteps lost in the distant rumble of the city collapsing. Sam's mind raced, running through possibilities, trying to make sense of it all. Every street they passed was in chaos, cars were abandoned in the middle of the roads, and people fled from the destruction. Yet through it all, Sam could feel it, the pulse of the black hole, beating in time with the chaos. That he stopped suddenly, his eyes widening as a new realization hit him. "I need to know where it started," Sam said, voice tight with urgency. "What do you mean?" "The meteor shower," Sam muttered. "The black hole fragments, they came from there. I think they were released when that meteor broke apart. It was no ordinary meteor, it wasn't just space junk. It was the beginning." Kevin looked at him, a mix of confusion and fear in his eyes. "You think this thing was, what, inside the meteor? It came from outer space?" "I don't think it came from outer space. I think it came from space, from the fabric of space itself." Sam felt a chill wash over him as he thought about it. It was a piece of the black hole. "The moment I touched that radiation, I became connected to it. And now, the black hole is trying to pull the world into it." Kevin didn't speak for a long moment, his face pale. He turned his gaze toward the sky, and for the first time, Sam could see the same fear in his eyes. The truth was sinking in. They weren't just fighting an alien force. They were fighting the very fabric of the universe itself. The wind picked up, whipping through the streets as a new tremor rolled through the ground. Sam's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing as he tried to figure out their next move. He had to find a way to sever his connection to the black hole, to stop it before it consumed everything. But how? He glanced at Kevin, whose eyes were fixed on the horizon. "I don't know what to do," Sam muttered. "I don't know how to stop this. It's too much." Kevin placed a hand on his shoulder, his grip firm, as though trying to steady Sam's unsteady heart. "Then we figure it out together. We've got this, Sam. We just have to keep going." Sam looked at his friend and nodded. They didn't have all the answers. But they had each other. And maybe that was enough, for now.